You are listening to Eastman's Flycast, an adventure fly fishing specific podcast covering travel, tactics, and next level insight. Now your host, Brian Barney.
Yo, what's happening, guys? Got a brand new Eastman's Flycast for you. So this week on the podcast, I have on Mike Lum. So Mike Lum's a buddy of mine. I've known him for years. He's one of the premier guides on the Madison, and he fishes all over, but he's got such a cerebral approach to fly fishing. And so this is just an awesome podcast as we talk about mindset, we talk about preparation, we talk about paying attention to the signs of the river, epic days of fly fishing. Like, this is just a great podcast that I really enjoyed, that I know you guys will enjoy too. If you want to get a hold of Mike, you can reach him at salmonflydry@gmail.com, or you can reach out to his Instagram account. He runs a great one. It's Hunt Harvest Cook. And again, his name is Mike Lum. Did great on the podcast. I really enjoyed it. I know you guys will enjoy it too. I want to thank our sponsor for today's show, Avid Max. I am so impressed by Avid Max, by their internet site. They just have absolutely everything for fly fishing. They have rods, reels, line, tippet, all the best name brands. They have apparel. They have camping gear. They have everything for dog needs. I mean, you name it, they have it. And recently, I'm so impressed by their selection, their flies. They also have fly tying. They do a YouTube channel where they do fly tying, but they have all the best patterns. So my favorite patterns, they have them all in there. I love Kelly Gallup's ties, and I got to get Kelly on the podcast as he lives, fairly close to me here. So I will connect with that guy and have him on. But I've been using the mini dungeon in black and white, olive, the full-size dungeon, the silk kitty in olive. Man, they've got the barely legal in gray and white and green and white, just killer streamer patterns. So if you guys are in the market for anything fly fishing, make sure to check out Avid Max. You can put in the promo code Eastmans10 and save 10% on your order. And also, if you're located in Colorado, they have a great store in Colorado. So they have everything in there where you can really touch and feel it and try it on. And they have a great staff in there. So they're located just out of Denver, I think it's like a suburb of Denver. Let me see, what is that called again? It's Centennial, Colorado. So about 10 minutes out of Denver. So if you guys are in Colorado, make sure to check out their store as well. And like I say, absolutely everything you could need for fly fishing, great internet site, and great store. So thanks to Avid Max for their support of the podcast. I really appreciate it. And with that, man, I'm dying to get out and do some fishing and do some swinging here. I've been talking to my buddy Dylan and trying to connect with him, and so we're going to do some swinging here November, December. There's still some great fishing to be had, and then I'm always gearing up for steelhead season and gearing up for spring fishing, and so couldn't be more excited. Been getting on the vise here lately and tying up a few bugs, so getting ready to rock and roll, and so during these good high-pressure warm fronts that we get in, I'm definitely going to be out and down on the river, so be fun to be getting out and back on the water. It's one of the funnest activities that I can do. I just absolutely love to be on the water for a day, a morning, an afternoon. So I can't wait. And having some great next-level conversations like today's podcast with Mike Lum. I really respect this guy. I fished with him once. We threw salmon flies, went down the river. It's been quite a while, but we're going to get together again and do some fly fishing. So, man, great conversation. You guys are really going to like it. Eastman's Flycast. I'm your host, Brian Barney. Here we go. Okay, I'm super excited. I've got Mike Lum, one of the premier guides here on the Madison River. Mike, thanks so much for taking the time, man.
You bet, Brian. Thanks for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, I've I've known you for quite a few years fishing the Madison, and I say one of the premier guides. You know this river better than anybody. You have a vast knowledge of this river and multiple other rivers in the Salt and all the other places that you fish. So, man, I'm just super excited to get you on the podcast.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to a conversation. I get to talk fishing a lot, but generally not in such a formal way. So yeah, I'm excited to see where this goes.
Yeah. So, do you have a good guide season? I know this year it was a little strange with COVID towards the start of the season, but did you end up running quite a few trips?
Yeah, I did. I haven't counted them all up yet, but I probably won't get quite to where I normally am. But we lost April and May and about half of June. But once we opened back up, about halfway through June, kind of the floodgates opened up. So yeah, I did quite a few trips. I'm still actually got a few stragglers here and there coming in to fish. We've got some nicer weather here. It's fun. Looks like fall is back at least for a few days here anyway. So yeah, it was a good season.
Oh man, it's gonna get nice. I heard like 60 degrees on
Uh,
on Monday, Tuesday.
that's right. I just booked a half day trip on Monday. So yeah, looking forward to kind of getting back out there again. It's been an interesting fall so far. A week ago we had sub-zero temperatures and a bunch of snow and trying to just figure out what was going to happen here. And now all of a sudden we're back to more kind of fall-like weather again. So who knows what's going to happen, but we'll take it.
The fall season is pretty special on the Madison, isn't it? I just
It
love
is.
these browns when they get all painted up and they start getting really aggressive, and then the pressure really lays off the river. It makes for really good fishing and good guide days, I bet.
It can be, yeah, especially when it's not so the conditions aren't so brutal and it's a little warm and sunny and yeah, you get those fish that are fired up and even you find some rainbows that color up too and kind of get a little fired up as well, in preparation for fall and get a little more aggressive too. So yeah, it's one of my favorite times of year. There's always, quite a bit to choose from this time of year and kind of pulled toward the elk woods as I know you are and pulled towards the river and bird hunting and everything else. This is September, October in Montana here is a tough time to kind of figure out what you're going to do every day. But yeah, this fishing on the Madison in particular, with those browns fired up to spawn is pretty special on some days for sure.
Oh, well, I'm glad I'm not the only one that struggles with time management this time of year. It's tough. There's so many fun things to do, You want to try to make the most of it. And I know, yeah, you're still working hard to get an elk down. You're a heck of a bow hunter and chasing those things now in the late season. But yeah, it's so nice to get to that river and especially when it's 60 degrees and you can feel the sun on your face and chase some of those bigger brown trout. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it too. I got to get out on a couple days here and get after it. But running these trips, like I just think it's so important for guys that are coming out west to go fly fish these different rivers to to at least weigh their options and think about getting a guide for a day or two at the beginning of their trip just to pick up information and knowledge, because you guys spend so many days out on the water that I know every day that I go out with you or another guide that fishes the Madison or any river for that matter, I just pick up so much information. I learn more in that day than I learned 5 days of fishing for myself. And so when you're going to a foreign place, I know like when I go to the Salt, I hire a guide for a day or two. I try to pick up that information, and it's the best money spent because you just learn so much. And then like guides like you want to set up your clients for success, and you know that if they've got 5 more days of fishing, you're going to give them some good tactics, some good flies. You're going to teach them kind of the river and how to read water that they're just going to be so far ahead of the game by going with you. So I just think it's so smart for guys to hire a guide if they're going to a river for a day or two. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something I've sort of preached to my clients over the years and to conversations I've had with guys coming out here to fish. You're investing in a trip. The trip itself is going to cost you, a pretty good chunk of money, and you're buying flies, you're buying licenses, you've got all the gear, you might be doing your research, and you're just whether it's a place you've been before or not, it's most likely someplace you don't fish all the time, and that extra investment of the 4 or 5 600 bucks to hire a guide for a half day even or a full day to really, yeah, get those techniques that aren't necessarily universally applicable, right? I mean, there's, even if you're a good fly fisherman, I've been fly fishing for a long time, and I more or less know what I'm doing, but that's great. You know how to cast, you know how to, in general, present the fly and, fly selection and whatnot. But every river, every watershed has, sort of different techniques, and they're constantly refined by guys who fish there all the time. And yeah, I've been fishing and guiding the Madison for a couple decades now, and it's a constant learning process of, I don't do what I did 20 years ago. I don't do what I did probably 5 years ago. Now, do I bring some of those things back? And it's, am I informed by those things? Sure, but it's always this constant learning process of, how can you tweak things? How can you do things a little bit differently, to be more successful on a consistent basis? And, we're the people who are here, whether it's the Madison, whether it's the Missouri, whether it's Spring Creeks, whether it's the Salt, wherever you may be going, the guys that are spending the time there all the time, in particular guiding, they're on the water, every day or many, many days throughout the season, they're seeing these little nuanced changes and things happening. And they're constantly, our job as fishing guides is to, certainly maximize the enjoyment and how to show people a good time, but really it's to help people catch, as many fish as we can catch. That's sort of the name of the game, more or less. And so to do that, we're constantly paying attention. We're constantly learning. We're constantly trying new things, whether it's new flies, new techniques, new rigs, just little ways to tweak things and do things a little bit differently. And, that knowledge isn't, not only is it invaluable, but it's not just widely available. You're not going to like go on a blog and, read some detailed account about what some fishing guide has done for the past, 2 months on the Madison that's working really well. It just doesn't happen that way. And so, yeah, if you can, going to hire a guide, and not only going to just hire a guide and say, okay, I want to go fish the Madison for a day, because if you do it like that, you're going to get a guide that's going to, hopefully, take care of you, treat you really well, and show you a really good day on the Madison, and, help you facilitate you catching a bunch of fish. But there's another layer to it in that, you really want to go into it with a very open mind and with the idea that you want to learn things. When I go, and we had a bit of a conversation before we press play on this, but, when I go places and I go fish the salt water and, go fish other rivers and whatnot, and I'll certainly hire a guide. And I go in to any trip with the idea that I want to soak up and learn as much as I possibly can while I'm catching fish and hopefully being successful. And, the difference is you're not just doing what the guide's telling you to do and letting them tie the flies on and letting them pick the flies. You're like really paying attention to the conditions, what's going on, where that guide wants you to put the fly, how he wants you to put it, the angles, the distance, yes, fly selection, why that fly now, water depth, water speed. There's a lot of different things. And it sounds, like it's pretty complex. And, I'm not saying that a beginner should come and, hire me and go, okay, I want to, learn to fish like you fish and learn all the whys and ins and outs. It's tough enough just to learn how to cast and present a fly well enough to catch a fish on any given day. I'm talking about anglers that may have a little bit of experience that are going to fish for, the rest of the week, on the Madison or wherever else, and really want to be successful throughout the rest of the week. And so I'm happy as a guide to teach you as much as I can possibly teach you in a day. I'm not one of these guys that hold stuff close to the vest. I don't believe in that. I believe in, sharing what I know, and helping, as much as I can, and giving you as many tips as I can so you can be successful going forward. That's just the way I operate. And I know a lot of the guys that I guide with on a regular basis operate that way too. We're happy to share what we know. So yeah, it's what you can glean from that, as long as you go in with the right mindset, is invaluable.
Man, I just love when you talk about refining and evolving your techniques, and what you did 5 years ago isn't exactly what you do now. It's always changing, and I think that's part of the beautiful thing about it is we enjoy that challenge. And Yeah, I love what you say about going into it with an open mind, like having your clients come into it with an open mind, asking questions and trying to get a higher understanding of why you're doing what you're doing, not just doing it or doing what you're told. Like it is about gathering that information, and it's wild. You can fish with 5 different guides, and you can pick up 5 different things, or different styles, the way they like to do things, or different presentations, or patterns, or whatever it is. It seems like everybody's so unique, even though we're all trying to accomplish the same thing. But that's just awesome, and I do know too. Like you say, not only is guiding, do you pick up this information and this knowledge, and also it's timing on this river. Like, I live on this river, and I'd like to think like I got a pretty good skill set fly fishing, but if I'm only out one day a week because I'm working construction all week, like, I'm not tapped into what's going on. It takes me a couple, 2-3 days just to figure out and get tapped in and start catching those fish. When you guys are out there day in, day out, like you're really set on the timing of things, and why it's working, when it's working. But man, I just think that's great. Oh, and the thing I want to mention too is, like, not only are you learning or picking up all this information, like, you get to go hang out with some of the coolest guys, the funnest guys on the Madison. Like, you get to laugh, and like, I just some of my best times have been going down a drift boat with good friends, and you get that when you hire a guide. It's, I'm not going to say it's exactly like a battle buddy in war, but you two are in it together to go catch fish that day and go figure it out. And through that, you build like this really great relationship, and you find true humor on the river, whether it's a back cast that lands in the trees, or, duffing a cast into the bank that you really need to make. You just have a great time. Like, it's just a great start to a vacation. So I think that's a big part of it as well.
Yeah, I agree. And I would say as well, it's a matter of how you go into it in your mindset. If you, and a lot of people hire guides for different reasons, and one of the things I like to have conversations about a little bit with people is expectations. There's a lot. I see guys, and I whether they say it explicitly or whether it's sort of an implicit thing that people show up with, this fishing this part of the country, fishing in Montana like this, and fishing in Madison, a lot is a bucket list for a lot of people, right? And they may have spent years reading about, how great the Madison is, how great Southwest Montana is, and they saved up or whatever it is for this trip. And this is a dream trip, right? I'm coming to, like, trout Mecca. And so my expectations are through the roof. Like, I read these magazine articles about guys catching these fish, and, I just, the reality versus, the magazine article or the 30-minute video where guys are just hammering, 20+ inch fish every day, all day. That's expectations are a big part of whether or not you're going to have a good time on the trip, right? And yes, this is an amazing place. I mean, the breadth and width of fly fishing around here, Southwest Montana, Yellowstone Park, all this area here is unparalleled anywhere in the world. It's some fantastic fly fishing, but it's still fishing. And if you've done, whether or not you've done an extensive amount of fly fishing throughout your life, it's still to be aware of the possibilities and the potential of at any given day, at any given time, on any given fishery. It's still fishing. There's no guarantees. And as long as you come in with the idea, all I want to do is have a great time on the river, have the opportunity to catch a couple fish, and if I have the best day of fishing I've ever had in my life, that's great. That's icing, and to be honest with you, more often than not, the clients that we generally get, that happens quite a bit. People have a great day, whether it's the biggest fish they've ever caught on a fly, their first fish on a fly, the most fish they've ever caught on a fly. That experience happens a lot, but it doesn't happen every single day. So, what you're saying there about the camaraderie and about spending time on the river with someone, who's yes, an expert on this particular fishery or fishes this river a lot, the amount of learning that can happen there, that's all part of it. But it's really, I go back to, again and again, to how you go into it, the mindset and how you approach it. And that can make or break a day. That can make or break, how the what kind of a time you have. You have a good time. If you're disappointed, that's not really doesn't have anything to do with the fishing. That has to do with the mindset going into the fishing. If you expect to go, and I read in a magazine that I come during the salmon fly hatch and fish the Madison, and I'm going to catch 20 inch plus fish on a big dry fly every day, that maybe that might happen, and that's great. It's awesome. The opportunity is there, but does that happen every day? No, it doesn't. And I wish it did. I wish I could show every single one of my clients that. But yes, that camaraderie, that relationship, that potential to learn, and spend the day with someone like that on the river is absolutely invaluable.
Oh, absolutely. That's a really good point, Mike. The expectations that can make or break a trip. And, too, you have to enjoy the process. If you love to fly fish, like you love to be out fly fishing, you can't just love it when you just catch a big fish and that's your whole goal, and the only time you're ever having fun is when you land a 20-inch plus fish. Like that isn't fly fishing. And so you have to enjoy the process that goes around it. And I know for me, these western rivers around here, any given day they can kick my butt, and it does seem like even during the best hatches, during the best fishing, like I don't hit it on the mark every time. I'll be high on the hatch or low on the hatch, or maybe the bugs didn't come off or the wind was bad, but it seems like I've got to put in a few days or maybe even 10 days before I see one of those magical days. But when you do see one of those magical days on these rivers out here, when it just goes off and they're all eating it, or big fish
man.
that are, there is nothing like it on planet Earth. So that one like outstanding day, that's my payoff, and that's what keeps me going. And now, like, I know it's possible, and so if I have a tough day fishing, I still have fun, I still laugh, I still fish hard, and I'll still tie into fish. But I know that payoff is coming, that if I keep working hard, keep spending my time on the water, eventually I will see one of those magic days you're talking about.
Yeah, and that's the thing, man. I mean, that's why I fish. That's a big part of why I fish. I know it's obviously why you fish. I mean, I know you've spent some time fishing for steelhead, and spent some time in the salt. I spent quite a bit of time in the salt over the years. And I've gone down to the Florida Keys, and I've spent a week barely fishing because the weather's awful, right? And then you go down there and you have this epic day where you jump 10 tarpon in a day. You have this epic day in the Pacific Northwest. You spent days and weeks and months swinging a fly with a spey rod to steelhead, hoping to get an eat. And all of a sudden you have an epic day where you land like 3 or 4 steelhead, right? And I had a day this summer, on the Madison, and I was working, I was guiding, and a day just like this, and the Madison's an amazing fishery. It's an amazing dry fly fishery, and over the years, I've had some incredible days fishing dry flies, and this day late in the season, in late August this year, with a couple of clients who just were just really nice guys, good fishermen, not novices. They knew what they were doing. They weren't experts, but they knew what they were doing, and we were fishing dry flies, and we fished single dries all day. And it was, Brian, it was for me, I was so excited at the end of the day to go back and tell all my buddies what my day was like. But it was actually so good that I couldn't really tell the truth because people would think I was BSing them. Because it was one of those days. For me, it was like a top 5 all-time career day in guiding.
Wow.
And it was that. I mean, it was literally, and the Madison's got somewhere around 3,500 fish per mile, so supposedly, right now as a population, right? And it was almost like every single one of those fish decided to eat it. And it was just, I mean, literally, Brian, I had a conversation with my clients about halfway through the day. And I was thinking about this, and we're floating down and we're catching fish just unbelievable on single dries all day. And I'm thinking I'm kind of quiet. I'm thinking about this. I'm like, guys, how do you feel about this? Do you think there is such a thing as catching too many trout on a fly in one day? And they both looked at me, and neither one of them said, no way. They both looked at me and had to think about it. That's where we were at in our day. and they may never have it today. I may never see a day like that again guiding. I may never have a day like that. I mean, without a rod in my hand, that was probably one of the most fun days I've had in years fishing. And I never threw a fly rod. I mean, it was, and that's the thing, man. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's those things, those pinnacle, and you never know when that's going to happen. There was no reason for that to happen. That was completely out of the blue. The day before, I had fished downstream, and it did well. Fishing the same flies. And we were having good days. It was consistent. We had another good hopper year this year. Good grasshoppers, dry fly fishing, and it was having great days. And I'd heard sort of rumors about, it was better upriver, and I'm going to go check it out. So sure enough, I went up there and just did this day, and no idea why. Just all these confluence of factors came into play at the same time, and it was just mind blowing. And that's it, right? It's that 3 or 4 steelhead day. It's that 2, 3, 5 tarpon day. That's what we do it for, right? That's what keeps us going. That's what keeps us coming back. It's really that, and certainly, like you say, the camaraderie and the experience, and and it's really, yes, there are those days, and that's the carrot on the stick, right? But it's also, the days where, you're standing on the bow of a flats boat in the middle of the Florida Keys, and you're looking around at, 3, 4 feet of water, waiting for a tarpon to swim by, and you don't see one all day, but it's the most beautiful, spectacular thing you've ever seen in your life. It's a drizzly, gray, rainy day in the Pacific Northwest, standing waist deep in the steelhead stream, trying to perfect your spay cast because you haven't gotten to eat in 3 days, and it's enjoying that part of it too. It's all of it. I always tell, one of the things I always like to tell my clients, man, it's, if it were only about catching a fish, there's much more efficient ways to go about catching a trout than on a fly rod, right? You put a worm on a hook and you put it in a hole and you're going to probably catch a fish, right? We choose to fly fish because we choose, just like we choose to archery hunt. It's difficult. It's not easy. We choose to put these limitations on ourselves because we know we can do it another way. We know we can find an easier way to do it. We choose to do it a more difficult way because in the end, it's that reward. It's more intrinsically rewarding to do it this way. And that's the reason, right? I mean, it's bow hunting. It's hiking in the backcountry to chase elk around. It's trying to catch a tarpon, trying to catch 100-pound fish on a 4-inch long fly. It's trying to catch a trout on a little piece of steel with some chicken feathers on it. We're making it difficult on ourselves, and thereby we're increasing the reward at the end.
Oh, you hit the nail on the head. You articulated that so well, Mike. That gets me fired up just hearing about it. And it is like, it is the challenge that draws us back. And if you had those those insane days every single day, I think I'd lose interest. I think it stopped being fun. Like, I like the challenge of it. And I like that day that you saw this year was your top 5 guiding days, all the days you spent on the river guiding. Like, man, oh man, like, it feels like magic when it happens and all the conditions come right, and it's like that. It's like something that you can't buy, you can't pay for, you can't create, you can't recreate. Like, you have to just put day in, day out on the water, and eventually you see one of those magic days and it's just going off, and all the trout are eating your flies and the big ones are looking for it. Like that, to me, that feels like magic. Like, I can't even describe like the feel. Like, it's just so much fun. It like doesn't get any better, and that is the payoff and the reason we go back. And that magical day, just like you said, it can happen any day on the river. It could be like I caught a blue wing olive hatch this year during a overcast day that was absolutely insane, where all these 20-inch fish were coming up and eating it right in front of me. Like, or a mayfly hatch, like, and we don't get, our March Browns usually come during dirty water, and it's like I never quite hit it right, and I always catch a few fish on them, but then all of a sudden you have that one day where you catch the overcast and the river's clear and there's all these March Browns coming down and those fish start to eat it, and you see absolute magic. Like it can happen on any day on that river. It's just about spending our time out there to see that payoff. And you're right, it is it's everything else that goes along to it. And there is no better way to see this valley than floating down that Madison
Yeah.
River. I mean,
Yeah.
looking at those mountains that are just cranking in the backdrop, and you're in the center of this valley floating down. And not only that, but you're seeing moose and birds and deer and then like to watch those trout eat it like you had with that day with that single dry, to watch those browns and those rainbows move on that fly and take it and eat it, that excitement, that thrill, like I just haven't found much else other than nature like creating
Yeah.
that does it for me. And for me, like, I'll take that dry fly day you had. Like, I think that's more thrilling and exciting than jumping out of an airplane, bungee jumping, like whatever it is. Like, I get more thrill out of a day like that than I do anything else. There's just no excitement like it, man. That is so much fun. Man, that had to be a good day with your clients. So, like, what makes a really good client for you? You said an open mind. Like what's your perfect client to be able to mold? And I know, like you say, everybody comes in with a different skill set, and you can't turn a novice into a professional in one day. But you're trying to maximize their skill set to put them in as many fish and to learn as much as they can in one day. And I think one day with you, like you gain years worth of knowledge in that one day. So what would make like the perfect clients for you, or the perfect client for you?
Yeah, that's a good question. A lot of folks we get are pretty casual, and are, either here on some other business, whether they're seeing Yellowstone Park, whether they're just on vacation and want to relax, never fly fish before, want to try it, and that's fine. And I don't, that's great. Beginners are great. I love to take beginners fishing because, generally speaking, their expectations are pretty low. So if we catch them a fish or two, that's awesome. It's I think, to sort of answer your question more specifically, I think my favorite client is probably the beginner, who either hasn't fished at all or has fished very, very little, but who really wants to get better and who really wants to learn. And what I would say, a few things about that, what I would say to that person. And I don't generally get to talk to my clients, months or weeks before they come up here. I probably should. I probably should try to do that a little bit more, because I would make some suggestions. And the suggestions I would make would be, put a fly rod in your hand, get a little bit comfortable with it. You're so, hiring a guide isn't inexpensive. I mean, it's, $500, $400, $500 a day, depending on what you're doing, right? And that's not a ton of money, but it's not inconsequential either. And so, there are a few things that you can do, to sort of maximize that experience. I can absolutely, and I do it all the time, spend 30, 40, 50 minutes, an hour in a parking lot teaching someone how to cast. Right. And then we got to talk about, and when I start doing that, every single time I sort of realize how much there is to that. If someone's literally never held a fly rod in their hand before, from teaching them how to hold it, what to do with their fingers, what to do with their hands. We're not using, especially if they've fished with a spinning rod or other kind of rod before, it's a completely different deal, right? We generally don't use the reel. We're using our hands in place of the reel, in place of the drag. We're doing things very, very differently. The cast is very different from a spinning rod. So, what I would say is get a fly rod in your hand. Whether or not you go take a formal lesson, you don't necessarily need to do that. Go to a fly shop, get someone to spend, 15, 20, 30 minutes with you, get familiar with it, get familiar with the feel of it. How things are going to work, how we're going to do things. Great. If you can take a casting lesson, do that. I mean, that's, spending 25 or $50 on a casting lesson at a fly shop, or a lot of fly shops will do it for free, particularly if you go, cast a rod and, like you're going to buy a rod or whatever. That is going to pay huge dividends, because then we don't have to start from square one. Right? If you've got a basis in it, you know which end of the rod to hold on to, sort of what to do with your fingers, then we can build on that. We can go even further with me in the boat. Okay. And I can coach you on that. Instead of starting at very square one and you're totally uncomfortable, it's a totally foreign thing to you, at least a little familiarity. That would be sort of tip number one. The other thing I would say, and this is a little more nuanced, this might be a little more difficult, but reading water, that all that means is sort of understanding, where fish might hold, not even why, but where they might hold, and how you might want to put a fly there to get them to eat it. And really, ultimately, when you boil it right down to it, it's where might the fish be holding in any given spot, right? And so in a river, and this, we're going to go real basic here, in a river, fish aren't, I get this question a lot. Fish don't just swim around in schools and like a lake. Like a lake, they might swim around in schools. It's very different than a river. In a river, fish are going to hold in particular areas. And those areas can change based on conditions and whatnot. But in general, there's going to be some very, specific area spots where a fish will hold on any given day. And so understanding those kind of spots, whether it's a boulder, whether it's a gravel bar, whether it's the bank, any kind of structure, things like that, and understanding, spots like that and where a fish might be in relation to that. We talk about seams. A seam is sort of an edge between where slow water meets faster water, and you get that current speed change, and that we refer to that as a seam. And that is a spot that fish really like to gravitate to. They'll hold in spots like that. So becoming a little bit familiar with sort of terminology like that, and recognizing spots like that. One thing, and this is in particular about float fishing, and that's really what I do, is fishing out of a boat and float fishing the Madison. You're really only going to get one or two shots at a particular spot. And so, even if your casting skills aren't to the point where you can put the fly exactly where it needs to be at exactly the right angle at any given time, you're going to have a leg up. If you, number one, are a little bit familiar with a fly rod, and number two, you at least understand where a fish might be, right? Or, not like, again, not even why they might be there, but just you can look at a boulder and go, okay, I know a fish is likely to be holding along the side of that rock within a foot or two of that rock. If you know that you're going to have a leg up on the average person coming out here who's never fly fished before at all. So things like that are priceless, especially again if you're gonna pay to hire a guide. And those are things we can build on. You don't have to read books and spend hours and hours studying up on this and try to become a pro before you get here. But just a little bit of familiarity with these things is gonna go a long ways.
Man, such great insight. Yeah, I love that. Just spending time with your fly rod. I mean, it's the same thing with the bow hunt. When we go out, we're shooting our bows every single day leading up. Should be
That's
the same
right.
with these guys with their fly rods because, going down in a boat, just like you stated, you got one shot, maybe two shots at a spot to try to get your fly in the right location. And if you're familiar with that fly rod, it's hard to improve your skill set in one day. You can learn a lot, you can get better at casting, but it seems like really we learn, we learn a lot in our sleep, or this muscle memory, which
Yeah,
isn't actually our muscles,
right.
it's our brain, getting
Right.
used to that action. But when you go out and you cast a fly rod for an hour, whether that's on a river, whether that's in your yard, whether you're just getting familiar, and then when you sleep, your brain's replaying that. And when you come back the next day, you're far improved than you were the day before.
No question.
And
Yeah.
if you can do that for a couple weeks leading up, you're going to show up to your boat being able to put that fly where you need it and get your mends in where you need it. That's such a great tip, Mike. Just to reiterate, man, oh man, excuse me, that being able to cast it where you need it to is so important on the Madison. And then what you said about reading water and getting familiar with reading water, knowing that they can sit in front of rocks, on side of rocks, and knowing how your flies drift too, going down those seams that you're talking about. You can't throw it in that slack water, and you
Right.
can't mend enough to get a good drift with that fly, and all of a sudden that spot, you're out of that spot. You're not going to catch a fish in that spot because your line's going to catch the current, drag that fly out of the slow water. No fish are going to eat it, and now that you had the potential to try to catch a trout in that spot, but you didn't know the water, how your fly floated down good enough to be able to put it in the right spot, to where if you know water and how you get your drift down through there, you stick it on the seam and get your mend, and now you fish that whole seam down there. And also, I think it's important as you're float fishing down from a boat, is to be able to recognize that water and see it coming, to be able to throw it at the head of that run and fish it all the way down that seam from the start of that hole to the end of that hole, instead of not knowing how to read that or see it coming and throwing halfway in that, and then trying to throw your mend, and by the time you get your drift in, the hole's gone anyways.
That's right. That's right. And you combine that with someone who just picked up a fly rod for the first time that morning, and they're not going to be able to put it there anyway, so it's really, and so you think about a situation like that. Okay, a seam is where generally slow water meets faster water. The water speed changes on a seam, right? And it's so you've got a boulder on the bank, and you've got the main current coming by the side of that boulder. Well, that boulder is gonna slow down that flow, so there's going to be much slower water directly downstream of that boulder. Then you're going to have the main current coming alongside that boulder, and where those two currents meet is going to be a seam. So that explanation I just gave you describes a seam, right? And so we know that's where we want to put our fly. Okay, imagine me trying to make that explanation of a seam every time we go by one of those to put that, right? And you need to cast your fly there. And by the way, you need to cast your fly on the very upstream end of that seam, so it floats down all over the whole thing instead of casting it right in the middle to not give the fish time to come up out of there and eat it, right? And so you imagine all that. And yes, there's a ton of really good water on the Madison, and it's a very forgiving river. You can almost throw it out on some days, just throw it out there anywhere, and you're going to get one. But at the same time, if you can have a little bit of understanding beforehand of what a seam might be, what an eddy might be, what a gravel bar, what a ledge looks like, what a drop off looks like, how to tell the difference, where, how to look at a piece of water and see where the depth changes, see the color change, and be able to recognize that. That way I'm not having to sort of, explain things every single cast, every single drift on this micro level. Right? I mean, imagine trying to do that. You're going to be sick of hearing me talk, after half the day, because I'm trying to explain these things to you, and you're going to be trying to get your fly in the right spot at the same time. It's tough, man. I tell you what, one of the toughest things, is to have complete beginners, people who've never held a fly rod in their hand before, book a half day, and a half day is about 4 hours on the water, and you're trying to get them casting. And people just want to catch fish, right? That's ultimately a beginner. They just want to catch a fish. They don't care if it's, 6 inches or 20 inches. They don't care. They just want to catch one. And I don't blame them. It's great. It's super fun. But, to get them from the point of putting a fly rod, here's how you hold a fly rod. The reel goes down. This is what a reel is. This is the line and not straight, all this stuff. And here's how you cast it to, okay, now we got to get the fly away from the boat. Now we got to get a drift. Now we got to get a drift in the right spot. Now you can start to see like all the speed bumps to actually being able to catch a fish. I mean, we talked about setting the hook and playing a fish and any of that stuff. Man, every time I start teaching this stuff to people who have never held a fly rod before, I'm like, man, this is a lot. Like that's what I tell people. That's my first thing. Like, okay, we set up the boat in the morning in the parking lot, and we're okay. I'm going to teach you how we're going to go over some things now. And the first thing I say is like, listen, I know I'm about to give you a lot of information, and all I want to do is explain this stuff to you so we're on the same page when we get in the boat. So if people can have a little bit of knowledge beforehand, a little bit of familiarity beforehand with some of this stuff, they're not going to like glaze over halfway through my, casting instruction and go, oh man, how am I ever going to do this? So yeah, it's, that would be very helpful.
I think that's the best tip you could give anybody, Mike. Like, and two, like a lot of the fun of going, on these trips is the anticipation of that trip. And the more you can prepare for it and ready yourself, like if you can show up and know how to cast a rod and know how to read water and know nothing else about the Madison, no flies, no nothing, like that's you're going to have a stellar day, because you're going to be able to teach them the nuances of the river and how to catch those fish, and they're going to be able to put it in the right spots. And I tell you, like trying to put your fly in a spot when you're in the front of the boat and you got somebody rowing hard for you, like it's tough to imagine what that's like until you're actually there. And when you're actually there, it's a high stress game. It's like you get
Yeah.
one chance to throw it in the right spot and get the right moves, but when you mess it up or you can't get it or you can't figure it out, like you say, you're spending hours of that day fishing ineffectively, where if you just spend a little time with that rod and reading water, the whole time going down, you're fishing effectively. Like, you two guys are going to kill him that day, So
Yeah.
I don't think you could give better tips for guys that are coming out. Just that familiarity. And I bet I bet it's really fun when you get a guy that's hungry and passionate and then can throw a fly rod you're going to have fun that day and get into some fish.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. No question. I don't want people to get the wrong idea. You don't have to be able to, hit a coffee cup from 50 feet away. Like, that's not, that's not what I'm saying at all. Just, enough so you know what a loop is. You can throw a loop. You can make, 20, 30, 20-foot casts, 15, 20-foot casts, relatively consistent. Maybe hit a paper plate at 20 feet, 8 out of 10 times. That is plenty. It doesn't need to be, you don't need to double haul. You don't need to be a pro. Just a little bit of familiarity. And yeah, you're absolutely right. There are definitely times I'll get guys on the boat that are at that level, and they're confident throwing a fly rod, at 30 feet, and they can do it consistently. And at that point, I'm deadly. Me rowing a boat and a guy like that is a deadly combination. If those fish are going to eat it all, we're going to get them. Yeah, there's times that the fish just don't eat, and there's nothing we can do about it. But if the fish are eating, and I got someone like that on the boat, yeah, we're going to get them for sure. It's just, the way I operate and the way I row the boat and the way I guide varies considerably on any given day, based on, who and what kind of skill level I have in the boat. And I spend the first 30, 40 minutes reading that. I can tell a lot in the first 5 minutes. I get a lot of guys say, oh yeah, I fished a lot and I fished this and that. And then we get in the boat and the first 5 minutes I'm like, okay, we need to stop, back up. Let's work on these things first, which is fine. It's absolutely fine. But yes, if you get yourself to a certain level of familiarity and proficiency, it's gonna pay you dividends, and you're gonna get more of your money's worth out of it. I mean, you're not paying $600 a day to go stand in the parking lot and me talk at you telling you how to cast. That's just not what we want to be out there floating the river trying to catch fish. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just, I wish more people would do that a little bit. It would just, I think, we'd have better outcomes, really.
Yeah, well, and like you say, you don't have to be that accurate. I mean, sometimes it does take an accurate cast to get it where you want it in the right place, but a lot of times the Madison's pretty forgiving, where you can throw it and you can mess up your cast and just leave it and you'll still catch a fish. There's a lot of different lines those fish will sit on, all the way from the inside to the outside. And I liked what you're talking about, like, once you start talking about water in the lingo, like, I think it's important for people to understand the lingo and what you're talking about, because you could be talking about seams and drop-offs and eddies, and then we kind of get our own lingo as fishermen too, as we and if you don't understand exactly what you're trying to tell me, I can't put it in that spot. But if I can read your lingo and know what you're talking about as far as a shelf or as far as a seam, the head of the run, the tail of the run, it's going to help immensely, to be able to put that fly in the right spot. That's just wild. So that good day you'd had, was that on hoppers?
It was, yeah. We weren't fishing specifically hopper patterns, but more or less, I think we were fishing a pattern called a water walker.
I love that. That thing works for salmon flies too.
I know it. For whatever reason, these little pink ones were working good this year, and I tell you, it was one of those days, Brian, where it literally didn't matter where you threw it. If you got it 5 feet, 10 feet from the boat, you were going to get an eat. I mean, we had fish eat it under the oar. I mean, it was so, we actually, at one point, we were going down about, 2 or 3 hours in, and I'm like, okay, we're going to see if there's a spot on this river right through here where we won't get a bite. And so we were going down places I wouldn't necessarily go, throwing dry flies out in some super deep, heavy water and this and that, and we were still getting fish up to it. So it's really, I learned a lot that day. I'm watching this and I'm going, I have no idea why this happened that day. I have no idea what all these circumstances came together to make all these fish eat. But I'm looking at these spots and I'm going, okay, interesting. Like that fish came out of, 3.5 feet of really fast moving heavy water to eat that little dry fly. I know that fish is there. I know there's a reason that fish was there. So I'm going to put that away, in the knowledge banks for later. And so, it's, for me, it's stuff like that. You're constantly, every day I go out there, and it sounds kind of cliche, but I learn a little bit of something every day I go out there. And, the reason I am able to do that is because I'm very cognizant of not getting stuck in a rut. I'm very cognizant of, I need to pay attention. It's really interesting. I'll go to places like my folks live in Durango, Colorado, and my dad fishes in San Juan, and I go down there occasionally, and I'll fish with him occasionally down there. They've got, I don't know if you ever fished San Juan, but it's very, very different. It's, they fish size 22s, 26s down there. They're nymphing with 6 and 7X. They're doing this crazy stuff, and I'm going down there, and they, okay, you got it. Here's a size 22 red midge larva, and you got a nymph with 6X. I'm like, all right. Okay, great. We'll go do that. And I'm like, I want to see how this, give me a size 12 red midge and, some 3X or 4X. And sure enough, put that thing on and nymph it through. Works sometimes better. And it's so interesting because there's stuff I did, 20 years ago that pop into my head at some point and go, wait a minute. Well, I haven't tried. In fact, a good example of that is 2 years ago. Years ago, 20 years ago, we used to fish a royal trude, a very standard fly in the Madison, and they sort of went out of favor for whatever reason. We used to fish big ones. In fact, we used to fish like 8s and 10s, and whatever they imitate, it's an attractor. It's it's sort of like what chubby Chernobyl or something is today. That was that back in the day, but it's a great fly. It floats really well, and I pulled that out 2 years ago. Hadn't fished one in probably 15 years. Like a size 8 or 10. And threw it out there, and sure enough, things working, and we got some great days on it. And so stuff like that, you almost forget what you knew, but that stuff is so valuable to kind of come back to and kind of, but you'll never get back to those things. You'll never have those thoughts if you go to a place and go, okay, you go to a fly shop, and you go, what do I do? What do I use? Okay, here's what's been working, blah blah blah. Okay, that's great, and do that, right? But don't be afraid to pull out your own stuff. Don't be afraid to do what you do at home. Don't be afraid to ask your guide, say, hey, what do you think about this? And, for me, I will always say, yeah, let's give it a shot. Let's try it. Might not be the first thing I want to go to because this is what worked yesterday and this is what's been working. But I'll give you another little anecdote here. I had some guys, I'll never forget this. This is one of my really, really interesting learning experiences for me. I had a father and son from Calgary come and fish with me, and they fished the bow on a real consistent basis. They were very, very good anglers. They were like top level, like really good anglers. And we're fishing. I think we floated kind of in the middle of the Madison. We did well. And at some point throughout the day, about halfway through the day or so, they're like, hey, you mind if we try the stuff that we use up there? Great. They had this leech pattern. They had this other little beadhead pattern. I'm like, yeah, go for it. And I'm like, you tell me if there's something you want to see, you want me to row you someplace. And they're like, no, just keep doing what you're doing. And so we're fishing down there, I think below McAtee Bridge, and I'm fishing the right bank through the Cameron Flats. And all of a sudden they look out and they start throwing out the shallow water because there's deeper water in the banks in a lot of those spots down there through the Cameron Flats. And that's normally where I'm either fishing the shelf off the shallows in the middle, or I'm fishing that deeper water. And so I'm running down the shelf with the boat, and those guys start to throw out in the middle. And they're throwing in a foot and a half of water, and they start picking up fish, and literally fish after fish. And they're not big ones. I mean, they're catching 8, 10 inches, maybe occasionally a 13, 14-inch fish, but they are literally catching fish on almost every cast. And I'm looking at them, I'm going, what? What is? I would have never thought to fish that fly in that spot like that. And I tell you what, I've gone back to that time and time again, and it is absolutely, you're like that water. You're looking at that water, and it's a foot deep. You're like, there is no way. And it's so again, going back to mindset, and you and I are both know that in almost everything you do, mindset is such a big part of it. And having an open mind, whether you're chasing elk, whether you're chasing mule deer, whether you're fishing, fishing for trout, fishing for carp, whatever, you know, the way you go into it with your mindset is so important. Again, you go back to it'll make or break it. And not only it has the potential to make or break any given day, but it has the potential to sort of make or break whether or not you progress in what it is you're doing. In your chosen sport, we love to do the things we're doing. And we want to progress. You and I, we want to learn. I want to be a better bow hunter. You want to be a better fisherman. You want to be a better bow hunter. You're an amazing bow hunter. You want to be better. What can I do differently? What nuance am I missing here? What can I learn from this particular situation? Well, that takes a certain mindset to go into, to be able to accept and to see those things happen in the moment, and then to be able to, sort of internalize those and take them forward. It's a real particular thing. It's not just anybody that can be able to do that. You got to pay attention to it.
Man, you've got a really good grasp on mindset, and I think it's a testament to why you're such a good fly fisherman, elk hunter, guide, is that you're a student of the game. Like, experience is the best teacher, but we have to pay attention to it when it's happening, and we have to, just like you said, have an open mind and be willing to try different things in different water. And sometimes it's unorthodox, or people will tell you it won't work, and sometimes it works the best in those cases,
That's right.
But yeah, being able to think outside the box and theorize and try to figure, why are they doing what they're doing? Why are they laying where they're laying? And then, being able to be a student of the game and continually learn. Like, it's just amazing all the days you've fished, all the days you've guided on the Madison, and you're still telling me about learning and being a better fly fisherman, and that you're learning every day that you're out there. I just think that's such a beautiful thing, Mike. I think that carries over to everything in life, but especially these hobbies that we love. Is just being a student of the game, and that male ego can get in the way too. And I try not to let it to, as much anymore, as try to just have an open mind and start from scratch, but letting that ego down, really asking questions and understanding it, and not just feeling like you know everything, or you know how to catch fish, or you know how to cast, like really listening and taking in that information and shutting that ego off. Because I know if I'm fishing in a boat with Mike Lum and he tells me to cast a different way, I'm dang sure going to try to cast a different way, because I know you've seen it every way from Sunday, and this is the way you want to see this rod casted, or this fly presented, or where you want to see it. Man, I'm going to try it wholeheartedly and believe in it. I'm not going to let my ego get control where I know how to fly fish better than my guide. It's like I'm going to listen and absorb and learn, and that's what's going to make me better in the end. I just think it's so beautiful how you stated that.
Yeah, and that's the thing. At least try. You might be an expert fisherman. Yeah, you might have fished all over the world, and you're the greatest caster, and you can throw it 100 feet and this and that. That's great. That's all great. That's fine. But at least try, because for me, and I know for you, it's really, that learning process is a big part of why these things are so special. It's a big part of why we commit to these things and why we're drawn to them, is because, you're never really going to be perfect. There's so many opportunities to do things differently, and there's so many. That's why I think that's part of why, you mentioned a little bit about, engaging with nature, and that's why it's so compelling. And this may be why, is that, the trout are going to do something different all the time. No matter how much, you may have fished for trout since the day you could possibly pick up a fly rod, and fish for them all over the world and seen all these different circumstances. But I tell you what, that next trout that you see, or that you catch your fly to, may do something completely different that you've never seen before. And they probably will. They do it all the time. That day I had this, I'm not like, where did that come from? It was just completely out of the blue. And, I have no idea why that happened. I wish I could recreate that. I wish I knew why that. Was it the fly? Was it it certainly wasn't the presentation. I don't think it was the fly. It was a whole bunch of things that came together to make this sort of perfect set of circumstances come together, and all of a sudden, it's just, I hate to keep going back to elk, but I keep thinking of the same situation. We both been in the situation where, you find this perfect, all the stars align, and you end up standing in the middle of, a herd of elk where there's 6 bulls around you, all going off, and you're downwind, you're upwind to some of them, but they could care less. They're just doing their thing all around you, and you're just standing there in awe of the situation. Like, I was in awe of the fish that day. I didn't have to do a thing. All I had to do was soak it up. And like, what can I learn from this? Enjoy this. This may never happen again. This is one of the reasons that I do this. And I get so fired up about it. And part of this is being able to take it in, and yes, leave your ego aside, and really be able to learn from those, and take in as much of those circumstances as you possibly can, and so maybe at some point in the future, you can recreate that, or that can happen again for you for whatever reason, and you can learn a little bit more the next time, and yeah, it's so interesting and so rewarding to be in those situations. It's almost indescribable.
Oh, it is. Yeah, well, and you've mentioned it a couple times, like putting it in the memory bank and remembering why it happened that way. And sometimes it is like a conscious thought, but sometimes it's like a subconscious thought, or it just goes into your fishing instincts. So you may not even think why you're doing what you're doing, but you just learn from these days on the water and these days of field. It's just such a beautiful endeavor, and it's so great that like me and you can be doing this our whole life, whether it's bow hunting or fly fishing, and still love it so much, and still be in awe over what we see out there, man. It's so great. But yeah, I've got a ton of respect for you and your knowledge, and this podcast has really shined a light like on the mental side of things and how you think about things and being a student of the game. And I think that's so important. I mean, I think that's one of my big takeaways from this conversation. But Mike, man, I can't thank you enough for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your knowledge.
Yeah, you bet, Brian. And I just wanted to say that, like you said earlier, that, the idea of mindset and how to approach things, that carries over in virtually every area of life. You can apply that, pretty much universally to everything in life. It's so much of it's about how you go into it. So yeah, I mean, I really appreciate the opportunity to have this conversation, and you having me on, and it's great. I love to have conversations like this with passionate people.
Yeah, well, I love following your social media. So on IG, you're Hunt Harvest Cook. You run, right? Isn't that right, Mike?
Yes. Yep.
Yep. Hunt Harvest Cook. Yeah, you run a great social media page. And if anybody wants to get a hold of you about fishing the Madison or seeing it, it's a great place on IG to follow along and then to get a hold of you on there. Man, I just can't thank you enough. It's a great conversation.
You bet, Brian. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Again, super fun conversation with Mike Lum. I really enjoy Mike and respect that guy. And I love how he's just a student of the game, constantly learning and taking in information, evolving and adapting his tactics. I just think there's so much to be learned from that. And I just can't thank him enough for taking the time and being on the podcast and sharing his information. So if you guys want to get a hold of Mike, again, check him out on his IG. He's Hunt Harvest Cook on IG. You can send him a message there. Also, if you want to email him, you can email him at salmonflydry@gmail.com. So, awesome conversation, awesome podcast. I'm really enjoying doing it. Got to get back on the water here and start swinging and throwing some bugs. I got plans with my buddy Dylan here to fish November and December, so really looking forward to that, and looking forward to getting into some steelhead water and trying to tie into some of those silver bullets and see what a guy can do. So yeah, it'll be fun. It's nothing more engaging or nothing more exciting than having a day to spend on the river. So I absolutely love it. Thanks to you guys for all your support. Also want to thank Avid Max. Again, check out their website. You can punch in Eastmans 10 as a promo code, get 10% off. Also, remember you can visit their storefront just out of Denver there, Centennial, Colorado. And yeah, just a great company. I'm so impressed, like I say, by their selection. They have absolutely everything for fly fishing. So I've been thinking about getting a new spey or a new switch rod for steelhead fishing, a little bit heavier weight one for fishing down out of the boat. And so I've been checking them out, and then also need to get some new lines, and then so impressed by their streamer bugs or their bugs in general. But they have all my favorite streamers. The Gallops Nancy P, or I think it's like the Peanut Envy is what I've always called it, in olive. Such a good bug. The mini dungeon has just been a go-to for me. The mini dungeon in black, that thing works so good. And they also have white and olive, the barely legal. That thing was crazy one day on the Madison. I stopped in this hole on the Madison, tied on a green and white barely legal, and I just killed them in there. And I had one of them. All I had was one bug. And I started killing them and catching fish, and I wanted my dad to catch them too. My dad can cast a spey rod, but he hasn't used one as much as I have or recently, and it was like the only way to fish this thing was to swing it with this weighted line through this hole, and I was getting them every drift or every cast, every swing through there. And so I said, Dad, come out here, check out this spey rod, throw it out there, and kind of went through the motions again with him and threw it out. And he's used to a different setup than this one. So, he kind of cast out there, got a swing, didn't get anything. And then his second cast, he snapped that bug off on his cast, and I had no more barely legal. And you think I could get another bug to work in there, but I just couldn't. We ended up catching fish, and it was a good day or whatever, but so funny. You snapped the one off I had in my box. So I had to re-up on my bugs as well. But yeah, that barely legal in green and white, and then the one in gray and white is such a great bait fish pattern. I killed some big fish on that this last spring, and that gray and white too. So that's just a great bug. But yeah, check out Avid Max. Great store. I really appreciate their support here on the podcast. So if you guys are in the market for anything, make sure to check them out. And with that, God, I just got to get out a little bit more here. I've been so crazy for big game hunting here in the fall. I really wanted to take time and be on the river, but it's just a tough balance with family and hunting and everything else. But I am excited to get after it here. This late fall, early winter, spring is one of my best seasons. And so, man, I'm fired up. I'm getting my gear ready again, and going to get out there and see if I can't hook into some big browns, big rainbows. So fun. So thank you guys to your support. Really enjoying doing this podcast. And I just really appreciate the downloads and the comments wherever you listen to podcasts, the iTunes and things like that. That really helps me out. And the shares on Instagram and things of that nature. So you guys are the best. Thanks for the support. I appreciate you. And check in with you guys next week.